There's something different about people who remember life before Google. Maybe it's the way they can sit with uncertainty without immediate panic. Maybe it's how they trust their own memory instead of reflexively reaching for verification. Maybe it's that quiet confidence that comes from knowing how to figure things out without a search bar. Because growing up before Google didn't just change how you access information, it forged a specific type of psychological resilience that experts are only now beginning to understand. And by the end of this video, you're going to see why life before Google created some of the most resourceful, patient, and adaptable people alive today. Let's start with something most people get completely wrong: the assumption that instant access to information makes us smarter, more capable, better decision makers. But people who grew up without Google prove that theory dead wrong. Picture yourself as a 12-year-old with a burning question, not about homework, something deeper, something you can't ask your parents. Maybe it's about your changing body. Maybe it's about whether what you're feeling is normal. Maybe it's a question so specific, so strange that you're convinced no one else has ever wondered it. You're sitting in your room and that question just sits there, heavy, unanswerable. You can't text a friend at midnight. You can't pull out your phone and type it into a search engine. The library is closed until Saturday. That question lives in your head for days, maybe weeks. You turn it over, you wonder, you observe people around you for clues, you piece together fragments from conversations, from books you stumble across, from the encyclopedia if you're lucky enough to have one. Sometimes you never get the answer. Sometimes you build one yourself. Picture this: a Tuesday evening in 1994. You're 10 years old and your teacher assigned a report on the Amazon rainforest. You pull out Volume A of the World Book Encyclopedia from the shelf in your living room. The book smells like old paper and possibility. You can feel the weight of it in your lap. You flip through pages, scanning entries, hoping Amazon is covered in enough detail. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you get 3 paragraphs and have to get creative. You read adjacent entries. You absorb information you weren't looking for. You learn about anacondas in the Andes Mountains because they're right there on the same page. This wasn't limitation, it was lateral learning. You learned to synthesize from incomplete sources. You discovered that adjacent information often contained the real treasure. Neuroscientists call this associative learning, and it builds richer neural networks than targeted searching ever could. Here's what's remarkable. Your brain was creating knowledge maps, not just collecting isolated facts. You retained information better because you had to work for it. The cognitive load of searching made the findings stick. Today's students can Google Amazon rainforest and get 847 million results in 0.43 seconds. They skim the first link and move on. But you developed something they're missing: the ability to construct meaning from limited data. This wasn't inefficiency, it was cognitive training. Picture this: Saturday afternoon, 1997. You're at the mall with friends and you get separated. No cell phones, no way to text "Where are you?" You agreed to meet at the food court at 3 o'clock, but it's only 2:15. You have 2 options: wander around hoping to bump into them, or find a payphone and call someone's house. But here's the thing: you actually know the phone numbers. Sarah's is 555-2847. Mike's is 555-1203. You've called them enough times that the numbers live in your memory, assigned to specific people, like birthdays. This wasn't just memorization, it was cognitive architecture. You learned to store essential information in biological memory, not digital backup. Psychologists call this internal locus of control, the deep knowledge that your brain is reliable, trustworthy, competent. Here's what's extraordinary: your hippocampus was getting a daily workout. Every phone number, every address, every friend's birthday you remembered was strengthening your memory systems. Research suggests that people who grew up memorizing essential information have better working memory capacity in their 40s and 50s. Modern kids don't know their own parents' phone numbers. They rely on contact lists and autocomplete. If their phone dies, they're genuinely helpless. But you built neural pathways that still serve you. You can remember faces, names, directions, sequences. This wasn't trivia. It was building a capable mind. Consider this. You're 15 and you heard a song on the radio that absolutely destroyed you emotionally. You caught maybe 3 words of the chorus. The DJ didn't announce the title. You have no idea who sang it. That song becomes a ghost in your life. You listen to the radio for weeks hoping to hear it again. You describe it to friends who look at you like you're crazy. You hum it to the guy at the record store who shrugs apologetically. Maybe you hear it again 6 months later and sprint to write down the lyrics. Maybe you never find it. Maybe it becomes the one that got away. This wasn't deprivation, it was desire management. You learned to live with wanting. You discovered that not every question gets answered immediately, and the world doesn't end. Neuroscientists call this delayed gratification tolerance, and it's one of the strongest predictors of life success. Here's what's remarkable. Your brain was learning to sit with discomfort. That low-level yearning for resolution actually increased the emotional value of the eventual discovery. When you finally found that song, the joy was profound. Today's teens can Shazam any song in 3 seconds. They Google any question the moment it occurs to them. They've never had to wonder and wait. But you developed frustration tolerance that serves you in every difficult situation. This wasn't suffering, it was emotional inoculation. Picture this. Thursday after school, 1993. You need information for a project on ancient Egypt. You ride your bike to the library. You walk through the heavy doors into that particular silence, that smell of old paper and carpet. You approach the card catalog, a massive wooden cabinet with tiny drawers. You pull out the drawer labeled EG-EL and flip through hundreds of cards until you find Egypt History-Ancient. You write down 3 call numbers on a scrap of paper. You navigate to the 930 section. You scan spines until you find them. You pull out the books, sit cross-legged on the floor, and start reading. 2 of the books are perfect, 1 is way too advanced. You check out the good ones and ride home with them in your backpack. This wasn't inconvenience, it was executive function training. You learned to plan, navigate systems, evaluate sources, and execute multi-step processes independently. Psychologists call this self-directed learning, and it builds metacognition, awareness of your own thinking processes. Here's what's extraordinary. You were learning research as a physical, embodied practice. You understood information as something you had to work to access. This created a respect for knowledge that instant Googling never instills. Modern students type a question and expect the answer handed to them. They've never had to hunt through physical space for information. But you built spatial memory, system navigation skills, and source evaluation abilities. This wasn't busy work, it was becoming competent.
Consider this. Sunday dinner, 1996. Someone mentions that penguins can't fly, and your brother insists he saw a documentary where they did. An argument erupts. Your dad thinks penguins might be able to glide short distances. Your mom remembers reading something different. The debate goes on for 20 minutes. Everyone contributes theories. Someone suggests checking the encyclopedia after dinner, but by then the conversation has moved on. The question remains unresolved. You all live with the uncertainty. Maybe someone looks it up eventually. Maybe you just hold multiple possibilities in your mind. This wasn't ignorance, it was intellectual humility. You learned that you could be wrong, that others could be wrong, that sometimes nobody knows for sure and conversation is still valuable. Psychologists call this tolerance for ambiguity, and it's essential for complex thinking. Here's what's remarkable. You were practicing discourse without immediate fact-checking. You had to listen, consider perspectives, build arguments, and accept that resolution might never come. This created people who can engage in nuanced debate. Today's dinner tables see someone pull out their phone within 30 seconds of any dispute. Let me Google it. Conversation stops. The answer appears. No more wondering, no more exploring possibilities. But you learned to think together, not just retrieve together. This wasn't confusion, it was intellectual collaboration. Picture this. You're 17 and driving to a party at someone's house across town. A friend gave you handwritten directions on a folded piece of notebook paper. Take Main Street to Oakwood. turn left at the Shell station, go 2.3 miles, right on Cypress, third house on the left, blue mailbox. You're driving in the dark, you miss the Shell station and realize it 2 miles too late. You turn around, you try again. You find Cypress, but you're not sure if you counted right. You pull over, turn on the dome light, study the directions again. You backtrack, you find it, you feel victorious. This wasn't getting lost, it was spatial learning. You learned to navigate physical space using mental maps, environmental cues, and dead reckoning. Neuroscientists call this hippocampal navigation, and research suggests GPS dependence is actually shrinking this brain region. Here's what's remarkable. You were practicing direction without immediate fact-checking. You had to listen, consider perspectives, build arguments, and accept that resolution might never come. This created people who can engage in nuanced debate. Modern dinner tables see someone pull out their phone within 30 seconds of any dispute. Let me Google it. Conversation stops, the answer appears. No more wondering, no more exploring possibilities. But you learned to think together, not just retrieve together. This wasn't confusion, it was intellectual collaboration. Consider this. You're 14 and you've saved up $60 for mowing lawns. You want to buy a CD player. Not just any CD player, the right one. You can't read Amazon reviews, you can't watch YouTube unboxings, you go to the library and find the latest Consumer Reports magazine. You read technical specifications you barely understand. You visit 3 different stores and talk to salespeople, trying to figure out who's trustworthy. You ask your uncle who knows about electronics. You make a choice based on incomplete information, hand over your money, and commit. If you chose wrong, that's $60 and 3 months of work gone. This wasn't risky, it was decision-making under uncertainty. You learned to evaluate sources, weigh options, and commit without perfect information. Psychologists call this calibrated risk assessment, and it's a crucial executive function skill. Here's what's remarkable. You were learning that research has natural limits, and at some point you have to choose. You developed intuition. You learned to live with your decisions. This created people who don't get paralyzed by endless options. Today's shoppers can research forever. They read 147 reviews and still feel uncertain. They suffer from analysis paralysis. But you learned to gather enough information, make a choice, and move forward. This wasn't gambling, it was confident decision-making.
Picture this. Saturday morning, 1992. You're 9 years old. Your favorite cartoon comes on at 8 o'clock. Not 8 o'clock when you feel like it, 8 o'clock exactly. If you miss it, it's gone. There's no streaming, no DVR, no watching it later. You set an alarm. You wake up early on a Saturday, which is absurd, but the motivation is real. You pour cereal, sit on the floor in front of the TV, and you wait. You watch the shows before it, even the ones you don't care about, because you're not missing your show. When it finally starts, you give it your complete attention. Every second matters. This wasn't deprivation, it was value creation through scarcity. You learned that timing matters, that some things require your presence, that attention is finite and precious. Neuroscientists call this selective attention, and it's weakening in the age of infinite content. Here's what's extraordinary. You were training your brain to focus deeply for sustained periods. You weren't scrolling through options. You committed to what you chose to watch. This created the capacity for deep engagement. Modern kids can watch anything, anytime, anywhere. So they watch everything halfway. They scroll TikTok while streaming Netflix. But you learned singular focus. This wasn't restriction, it was attention training. Consider this. You're 13, and you said something stupid at lunch. You can see it on your friend's face, you hurt her feelings. You spend the rest of the school day feeling terrible. You can't text an apology. You can't DM her to explain what you really meant. You have to sit with the discomfort until tomorrow. Or maybe you call her house that night, and her mom answers, and you have to ask to speak to her, which is mortifying. Or maybe you ride your bike to her house and apologize in person. You have to read her face, her tone, her body language. You have to navigate the repair in real time with no editing, no deleting, no screenshots. This wasn't cruelty, it was social intelligence development. You learned to read nonverbal cues, repair relationships face-to-face, and sit with social discomfort. Psychologists call this emotional self-regulation, and it requires practice in real environments. Here's what's remarkable. Every face-to-face conflict you navigated built your social resilience. You learned that relationships survive mistakes. You developed the capacity to apologize authentically and forgive genuinely. Modern teens hide behind screens. They apologize via text. They ghost people instead of having hard conversations. But you built interpersonal courage that still serves you. This wasn't drama, it was becoming socially capable. Picture this. You're 16, bored on a rainy Saturday. You're wandering around your house looking for something to do. You pick up a book from your parents' shelf, something you'd never choose. Maybe it's about World War II. Maybe it's poetry. Maybe it's a philosophy book you don't understand. You start reading just because there's nothing else to do, and somehow it catches you. You spend the next 4 hours reading something you didn't know you needed. You discover an interest you didn't know you had. You stumble into a passion by accident because you weren't algorithmically funneled towards your existing preferences. This wasn't boredom, it was serendipitous learning. You learned to explore beyond your known interests, to give unfamiliar things a chance, to discover who you are through unplanned exposure. Psychologists call this identity exploration, and it requires space from algorithmic curation. Here's what's extraordinary. Your personality was shaped by randomness, by what happened to be available, by accidents. This created people with unexpected depth and breadth of knowledge. Modern teens are served content based on what they already like. The algorithm narrows their world. They never stumble into anything. But you developed intellectual range because you had to work with what was there. This wasn't randomness, it was real discovery. But some experiences cut deeper. Consider this. You're 19 and you're traveling alone for the first time. You're in a strange city with a paper map and a phone number for a hostel. You get off the train and nothing looks like you expected. The map doesn't quite match the street signs. You don't speak the language well enough. People rush past you. You're standing there, genuinely uncertain if you could do this. No smartphone to translate, no GPS to guide you, no way to instantly contact someone who can help. Just you, your limited information, and your ability to figure it out. You approach someone, you gesture, you try. You walk in what you hope is the right direction. You get turned around twice, and then somehow you find it. You find the hostel. You made it. And in that moment, something fundamental shifts. You realize you can do hard things. You can be lost and find your way. You are capable. This imprinted core belief, I can handle uncertainty. But that confidence existed alongside something darker. You also remember the genuine fear, the times you couldn't find the answer, the questions that stayed unanswered, the feeling of being disconnected from help. Not every story ended with victory. Sometimes you stayed lost. This created people who hold both truths, hope that they can figure things out, and realistic acceptance that sometimes they can't, confidence in their capabilities and humility about their limits, trust in their resourcefulness and awareness of their vulnerability. This complexity might be their most valuable inheritance. Let's return to that 12-year-old with an unanswered question sitting heavy in your mind. The one you couldn't Google, the one you had to carry. These people carry something the modern world desperately needs. They remember what it felt like to wonder without immediate resolution. They remember navigating with paper maps. They remember looking things up in books. They remember calling someone's house and talking to their parents first. They're living proof that resilience is built, not born. Competence comes from practice, not protection. Memory is strengthened by use, not outsourced to devices. And the best gift isn't instant answers, but the confidence to find them yourself. In a world of infinite information accessed instantly, they stand as evidence of another way. Not perfect, not without costs, but a way that produced people who can sit with uncertainty, navigate without GPS, make decisions with incomplete information, and function when technology fails. They grew up in a world where information was scarce, answers were delayed, and you had to work to know things. And somehow they learned to hold it all, the uncertainty and the confidence, the questions and the patience, the not knowing and the figuring it out. They remember life before Google, and that memory is a kind of superpower.